I went to a local comic book show and I picked up a few books. Stay tuned to find out what I got. Welcome back, comic book fans. This is Rusty again with Collector Auctions, and today I've got a short comic book haul from a local comic book show that I went to in Hunt Valley, Maryland, hosted by Clandestine Comics. So we'll go over the books and why I picked those up, but before we get started, make sure you hit that like button, slap the subscribe, and definitely hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on great comic book content like this each and every Monday and Friday at 10 a.m. All right. Let's get into the books. Now, I went into this show with my 2003 goals in mind. If you go back a couple episodes ago, you'll see a show where I talked about setting goals for 2023 and trying to stick to those goals. And so far since then, I would say I've been probably about 50-50 on being successful about keeping those goals, but I always seem to revert back to picking up good, high-grade smaller keys that I think I can work on in the shop, get them cleaned and pressed, and get them in the CGC, adding value to the comics. That's my old method. I still stick to that an awful lot, but I'm trying to cut back on that just because I've got so many books in the shop that I really don't need to keep adding books to do that kind of thing. I've got plenty of the books to do that kind of thing, but I'm trying to focus on the PC books that I really want for the PC. It's going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to try to be finding great values at conditions where I think I can maybe bump it up a little bit with a little bit of work. And again, still, just as before, get them into CGC, get them back, and have a really nice, high-quality book in my PC, or maybe it's for resale to help pay for some of this hobby. Now, if you go back and watch that video, you know some of the goals, some of the main books I'm looking for. And that's what I did in this episode, was look for these books specifically. I was going to stay on target, look for these books, and see if I could find great condition at really good prices, or to see if it even came close. And what I'm talking about are books right on top of the list. X-Men 101, the first appearance of Phoenix. A near perfect copy of Fantastic Four 244, the first appearance of Frankie Reyes Nova. Avengers 186. I've got my 9.6s in both of these last two, Avengers and Fantastic Four, but I'm looking for that 9.8 candidate, and they will always be on top of my list, as well as Spider-Man 294, part of that Kraven's Last Hunt. It's my favorite cover. I've gotten my 9.6 in that as well, but I can't get that 9.8 yet. So I keep looking for these books, and that's what I was looking for when I went into this show. And the other thing, of course, I'm always looking for are high-grade John Byrne X-Men books. Now, I'm not looking for every one of those, but I do want to continue looking for all of those, because there's definitely holes in that run from about issue 108 up to 143. So that's what I did. I went into the show, and I ended up circling the room probably about 6 times, and those are the books I was looking for. I look at the walls first, and then I start digging into the bins in these specific areas. It's pretty easy. Everybody usually has them marked by the alphabet, so I can figure out where things are, and I couldn't find anything. There was no X-Men and 101s I could even find. There were no Fantastic Fours 244, 186 for Avengers. I couldn't find Spider-Man 294 to save my life. But no, I was able to find high-grade John Byrne books, but not quite as perfect as I really wanted. There were ones that I didn't need, so I wasn't just going to rebuy those. The ones I did need, prices were okay, but the conditions weren't quite what I wanted. And I really want to get a 9.6, 9.8 run of that John Byrne X-Men. I talk about this in just about every video. That is one of my main projects. And I'm not going to buy a lesser book if it has more than one serious defect in that case. So overall, I was pretty unhappy with what I was finding. And as I said, I circled the room 6 times. There were some local dealers that I know, that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years, that I continue, literally, every time I circled the room, I'd stop and talk a little bit more. But I still couldn't find those books. but I managed to find a few books for some other special projects. So let's go over those books because I did manage to pick up a few books at this show. All right, so the first book I ended up picking up was a book that I had the regular version of last year, and I ended up getting it graded, and I ended up getting a disappointing 9.6 on it, and I ended up selling that book, but it's one that I was actively looking for a specific reason. Let me show you the book. Now, this isn't the color version. This isn't the final version. This is the variant sketch cover. It is JSA Classified #1 with the cover by Adam Hughes of Wonder Girl. Now, it's a wonderful full color illustration that he did, and that was a beautiful book that I ended up selling, and I'm always on the outlook for that book, and I was kind of disappointed I didn't have it for his upcoming CGC signing. And I would have definitely sent that book in, and when I went to the show, I still had about a week before I needed to get the books in for that signing, and this was a lesser book that I was definitely looking at this show if I happened to run across it. It wasn't definitely on top of the list like all the books I had just mentioned. But I ran across this at one of my favorite dealers from Pop-Up Comics, and this looked like it'd be in really nice shape. It wasn't too expensive, and it had a defect over here in the end that I could see, and I wish I had taken my friend's advice and actually taken the book out and looked at it a little bit better, because once I got this home and I started to clean and press it, because as I said, I didn't have a lot of time to get this in for the Adam Hughes signing. I needed to do a quick clean and press and get it ready to go. And I was able to get the tick out pretty good, but on the back, it's a black cover on the back, and it ended up having a few ticks, too many, that even one was going to knock it out of the list of contending books that I wanted to send in. So I ended up with a really nice book for the PC. It's a great Adam Hughes sketch cover. I'm just going to leave it in the PC right now. The defects will eliminate it from ever going back into CGC, but it is nice to have this kind of back in the collection at this point. The second comic that I ended up running across as I was going through the show, and as you can tell by this point, I wasn't looking for anything of those big books I was talking about at the beginning because I just wasn't finding them. So the secondary goal had turned into finding books for these upcoming CGC signings, and I ended up finding another, and this was a beautiful copy of Marvel's #0 from Alex Ross. And I actually already had this ready to go. It was prepped, ready to go back at the house, ready to go to CGC, and I ran across this, and it was only a few dollars. It's not an expensive book, but it's a book that if you can get it graded and signed by Alex Ross, it is actually a pretty expensive book. It's a good return on investment. And I went ahead and picked this up. Again, just a few dollars, nothing special about that. But I wanted to come home and kind of compare to the one that I already had prepped. And as it turned out, the one I had prepped was slightly better. This is actually really good. I think it's still going to be a 9.8 candidate. But for the meantime, it's going to go back in my PC, which is kind of nice. If you ever get a chance to open this book up, look at all the wonderful illustrations that Alex Ross did for that Marvel series. Just a wonderful, wonderful series. And I can't wait to get my other copy back in from CGC at some point. I did send that out with a few other Alex Ross books, so it's definitely on that list. There's a few in there I got that are going to end up being for resale, I'm sure, but this is one of the ones that I wanted to keep for the PC. The third book that I ended up picking up is one by J. Scott Campbell. It is a book that I've gotten signed in my PC. He was at Baltimore Comic Con a number of years ago, and it was before CGC was slabbing everything in sight, and I ended up getting him to sign this and some of his other iconic books that he had. But this is a Gen 13, wonderful cover, J. Scott Campbell there. And like I said, I got this in the PC, and I had another copy of this that I actually got graded as a 9.8. I ended up selling it. It was funny, I literally sold this just days ago. But I would have considered sending this to the signing, even the graded version, and have them crack it open. But it's a book that's so published that you can go out there and find a copy just about anywhere. They're not expensive. This is not an expensive book, but I consider it one of those signature covers, those iconic covers from J. Scott Campbell's. He has so many, but from the works from his early work, the Danger Girl work and Gen 13, to me were some of the most iconic that he did. Now, he's done a lot of great things since, especially some of those Spider-Man covers, and I'll probably be looking for some of those for that signing as well. I don't believe the signing is until September, so I've got some time, but I went ahead and picked this book up for a few bucks, and I'll have plenty of time to work on it in the shop and get this one ready as well for this signing. But I look forward to getting this one graded, and this is definitely a PC book for sure. The fourth book that I ended up picking up is also for a signing, but it's not necessarily a CGC signing. This is for an in-person appearance by Art Adams. He's going to be at the Baltimore Comic-Con this September, and so I'm going to be, just like I've got an early start on the J. Scott Campbell books, be able to pull some from that signing later in the year. I'm doing the same thing for the shows that are coming up at HeroesCon and for Baltimore Comic-Con. I'm getting those books prepped. I don't know if we're going to get them all graded by CGC, but I want to definitely have them as an option, and I'm trying to find the most iconic books from these creators. And with the Art Adams, you've got a number of books. Just like J. Scott Campbell, he's known for a lot of different books, but some of his early work is some of the most iconic. I've got a very nice classic X-Men #1 signed by him many years ago, and it's on the inside of the cover, so that is a copy. I'm going to be looking for a pristine copy of that at some point. But there was another X-Men book, sort of, that he did that it's just definitely one of those iconic covers from Art Adams' early work. Let me show it to you. And I picked this up. I've got copies of this before, but I haven't had it quite as nice as condition. But it is Heroes for Hope #1. Well, it's a one issue. He did the cover to this, as well as I'm sure he might have had some interior work. I can't remember that, but many different creators came together to work on this benefit book. But this cover was so iconic from Art Adams, and I thought that this would be a great candidate to take to Baltimore and to get signed by him, whether it is just for a raw copy to get signed and put into the PC, or whether it's a candidate to go into CGC to be witnessed and then graded. We'll see about that, and it will all determine on what other books that I end up finding. I ended up looking at a copy of Longshot #1 today at my LCS, and I almost pulled the trigger on it, but there was a little bit of a defect that I didn't think would merit out a 9.8 on that. So, and then I started thinking, while Longshot is very iconic for Art Adams, really wasn't a fan of that book or the art as much on that book. So I passed on that, but I will be looking for other Art Adams classic covers, classic books, and we'll see what we get signed. I'm sure I will do an episode on that, as well as the J. Scott Campbell books when the time comes. I'll probably try to do a pre-video on that, and of course, if it's going into the CGC, you'll definitely see a post video on what grades I got and what books I actually got signed. And the last two books that I ended up picking up were not books for any signing at all. It was just books I happened to find along with these ones that I got for the signings. And again, I wasn't looking for these books, and I was trying to stay on target, trying to find books that were on my goals list for 2023. But I ran across these while I was finding these books, and the conditions were fantastic, and the price was really good. So it's books that I think I've had one of the two. Didn't have the first one here. Let me show you to you. It is Action Comics #835, and it's in really nice shape. This is the first appearance of Livewire in DC continuity. Now, that's a book, actually her first real appearance was in Superman Adventures, I think issue #5, and I've been picking that copy up a couple times over the last year. But this is the first time I've had her first DC continuity book. So I went ahead and picked that up. As you can see, it had a $15 price tag on it. I think the deal I got from my guy, from Joe from Pop-Up Comics, was about $10 on this. I think he knocked a few dollars off because I bought a few other books as well. But this was a really nice book. The black on this, I think we ended up taking this one out and taking a look, and the black is really good. I don't see any spine ticks over there. But the other book I found from another dealer, and I paid $10 for this, and this is a really nice key comic. And let me show it to you. Daredevil number 105. And this is the origin of Moondragon, or as she is called in this, what is it? Hang on, it's Madam McEvil. Yeah, Adam McEvil. I think she's the distant cousin of Ronald McDonald. I don't know. That's just an awful name. But nice key comic. I didn't pull up any prices for you for grading and everything. I know this is a minor key comic and everything, but at a high grade, these books like this, these early 70s books from Daredevil that have some key moments in it, are actually grayed out pretty good. Only a few issues later, you've got the first appearance of the Silver Samurai in 111, and that is a great book if you can get those really high grades. Even at some of the lower grades, the 9.6s, 9.4s, it still maintains some value. And this is a book just like that definitely has some value at those higher grades. And for $10, I wasn't going to pass this up, especially at this condition. In fact, the dealer, when he was taking the books and he was adding up this one plus a few of those other ones, because it was a mix from a couple different dealers here, he kind of looked at that, and I think he was a little shocked that he had this book in the $10 box. But he was good. He honored the deal and made the deal, and we moved on. I mean, those guys are there usually to sell books, not to hold on to books. So it was a nice little deal for me, and I was happy to get this, and as well as the Action Comics there. And I look forward to getting both of these into CGC very soon. And that was it. That was the books that I picked up from the show. Nothing major at all. A few books that get signed, a couple of lucky small keys. It was honestly a pretty disappointing show. It's probably the most I've been disappointed in the shows so far this year. And I think a lot had to do with, I think some of the local dealers that show up at these shows all the time, I think they had other shows in the region so that they were going to that. So while the room was still pretty much full, there was definitely some locals in there. There were always locals in there, and I felt like I was seeing the same books over and over again, and I just wasn't finding what I was looking for. Again, I was being very specific about the books that I was in search of. I was trying to be disciplined again, and in the end, it was nice to be able to walk out of the show and not spend a lot of money at all. I didn't spend hard. I'm not even sure if I spent more than probably $50 altogether, and definitely got some books that I could hold on to the PC. I had some that were going to be great later in the year when I get them signed at the Baltimore Comic-Con, and then at the CGC signing for J. Scott Campbell. So those were fine, but nothing to write home about, guys. So I'm sorry about that part of it. But luckily, here in Maryland, over this next month in April, there are a couple I shouldn't say new, I should say other big shows that are happening. Now, this was just a local comic book show that happens every month, practically. The shows that are coming up here later in April, they're an annual show. They're much bigger. And I've never been to the one that's going to be down in Chantilly, Virginia, hosted by Big Lick Comics out of Roanoke, Virginia. I think they're going to be their second show there. So I'm going to go down next week, and I'm going to go see what they have available, what new dealers that may show up. I'm not really sure what to expect from that one at all. The other one's going to be at the end of the month in Hagerstown, Maryland. I believe that's called the Fork. I completely am forgetting right now what the name of that show is. It's like Forcon. I think it's something like that. But that's going to be in Hagerstown. It's a 2-day show, actually, and as well as the Big Lick show in Chantilly, Virginia. Both of these are 2-day shows. I won't be able to go on Saturdays, but I will go on the Sundays and check them out. And again, my hope is to be very disciplined. We're going to start off with X-Men 101, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers issues, the Spider-Man issues, those 3 issues specifically. And then we'll move over to the John Byrne X-Men. And there's a few other little things that are always on the list that come to top of mind. I'm always on the outlook for a fantastic copy of All-Star Comics number 58, for example. But I've already got one that's in really good shape. I'm looking for one at a good deal that's a little bit better. So those are just things that come to the top of the mind. But again, I'm going to try to stay disciplined at these shows. But that's it for today. If you guys get a chance, let me know what you think about the books that I picked up at this show by leaving me a comment in the comment sections. And be sure to check out my eBay page, my Instagram page, and my Shortbox page for any of the books that I'm selling. I don't sell everything, but I have a lot of slabs for sale. So guys, check that out if you're ever interested in looking at any of the books you ever see on my channel. If they're slabbed, they're probably going to be, some of them are going to be in my PC, but some of them will definitely be for sale. So check out those 3 sources. I've got links down below in the description on today's video. But that's it. I'm out of here. Thank you guys for watching today. And remember, every comic has a story.